What's up, Chris? It's Tuesday.
Man, the weather here in Texas has been a Tuesday trip. Holy
Yeah.
smokes. This morning, my daughter woke herself up coughing. She got a little, maybe some going on. So she woke herself up coughing at around 2:30. So I went in there and I knew that there were some thunderstorms coming. So
Yeah.
I hung out for a little bit and the thunderstorms came at 5:30 and oh man, it was quite windy. We're talking like 40-mile-an-hour gusts, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then tornado watch. So took the daughter to the center of the house just to like let her sleep in there, so that we just in case I didn't have to like try and hustle down the stairs, that kind of thing. And then this afternoon we had like a dust cloud or something blow through from
Really?
West Texas. Yeah, so it looked um, like apocalyptic out there, right?
Yeah, I bet.
Um, some the brown skies, not even gray, not even cloudy. It was brown, like dirt. So it's been an adventurous weather Tuesday, but that's not what everybody came here to listen to. Like you're not watching the practice playbook to hear us talk about the weather. You're here to learn about ways to make you and your accounting firm more effective. Typically through technology, but through all kinds of different ways. I'm Chris. He's Jay. Our names are right there. Um, you can definitely see that.
Yes, they are.
So we've got the right ones. We're in the right boxes. That's good.
For sure.
Last week when we talked about CFO advisory and how it's changing. How CFOs are going to have to make changes to the way that they have historically thought as we move into the future, particularly and not surprisingly as we focus on technology, the adoption of AI and automation, and how all of those things are going to impact not just the day-to-day work of a CFO, but also the team that they're going to hire, the people that they need to talk to, and all kinds of different stuff related to that. Today, Jay, we're going to get creative, um, but uh, but not in an Enron way, uh, probably. So creativity is still an important piece of accounting. And we read a blog post recently that talked a little bit about this. So shout out to, I think it was Mark was the guy who wrote it. Um, Shout out to that guy. Sorry I don't remember your name.
Thank you, Mark.
thanks thanks maybe Mark. I'm gonna find the article and pull it up. Mike. Sorry about that, Mike. This is Mike Manilak on Accounting Today, another Accounting Today think piece related to accounting's complicated history with creativity. Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, because while you may not think about it, creativity is essential in accounting. And Jay,
Reading this, I mean, it hit kind of
uh,
close to home because, I mean,
yeah,
that's what we are. We are creative thinkers when we are talking with our clients about ways to solve problems and ways to come up with solutions to those problems. So it was
that's right.
very, uh, that's the word I'm looking for. It was very reminiscent of what
Yep,
we do. So we wanted to
right.
talk about it and take a few moments to spread some of this. So let you
Yeah,
take it away.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
creativity. It is essential in accounting, and exactly like Jay just described, accounting does require more than just technical skills. It's not just the debits and credits, and particularly when you're doing advisory work, it's like significantly not just debits and credits. It takes accounting takes creative problem solving, and what that means is exactly what Jay was describing. Connecting what kind of information and data is available and how that information turns into debits and credits, and that sometimes requires creativity. And in fact just today I was working through this same type of issue with a client where there's an accounting related issue that we know that some reporting probably exists, but we don't know exactly where it is or what system it's going to come out of, or what it's going to look like, but we know we need it, and we know it's important. And so it took some conversations and that creativity to come up with an understanding of how should this be working, and most importantly, I think, Jay, like what the most efficient way to get to the right result and right answer is. And so I think when I think about accounting and certainly advisory, that creativity is definitely like a core piece of what that looks like. When you think about there are lots of areas where there's judgment, right? This is I've talked about this as I think about like the future of audit work. When you think about transactional activity, it's true that the underlying base transactions generally are pretty static, right? Like those ones you're not gonna get too creative with the day to day. But when you start to value bundled arrangements, when you start to identify areas where revenue should be attributed and how much, or when you try to like make anomalies or identify anomalies, right? When you're starting to see anomalies, or when you're estimating things, particularly things in this audit language, with high estimation uncertainty. So you don't know what the answer is, right? You have some uncertainty, and in all of those types of situations, there is a necessity for creative judgment. Like you have to be able to think about like, what does this mean? How does this mean? And what is it going to look like when you get to the end result, right? And so this can be like, I mean, you can think about it today, right? Some of the things that we talk about a lot are digital assets. We talk about cryptocurrencies, and if you think about how these things have been accounted for, it's been creative because there were no rules. So every single time you were doing some valuation of a cryptocurrency, like you were doing creative accounting. And then when we think about like software as a service companies, or certainly startup entities where they're starting to build out a process or build out a technology, like all the labor costs that you're using there and how you're allocating those labor costs, those types of things require estimation, which means that you have to be creative. And so I think that that's a like a really good baseline for this conversation, because creativity is critical in the accounting profession, and if anything else, like it's just going to continue to be more important as we go forward. Jay, what do you think about that as an introduction?
No, I mean, there's a lot to that because, you know, let's go back to the first weekend PPP was announced. We had to get very creative because there was no guidance, like you said. And, firms took what came out very literally and they
Hmm.
started applying for the PPP loans. Well, people applied for it with contractors in there. Well, it wasn't supposed to be contractors. Well, guess what?
Hmm.
Those that did file based on that got paid for or got the funds based on those contractors. So in
Right,
some cases you win, and in some cases, well, you waited, and then we got the guidance, and then we got more guidance, and then the
right.
guidance got reversed. Then we got more guidance.
Are you
It's
talking about BOI?
no talk about PPP here, and then we got the EIDLs, and then you couldn't do it with PPP. Then you could do it, and so we have all these unknowns, and if we don't be creative and start working with it, you're just gonna be paralyzed. So embrace the
Right.
suck and jump in and do it.
Yeah.
In some cases, I mean, I had one client, he got an extra 100K on his PPP because of that, and
Right.
luckily, he was able to work through it, and
Yeah.
it was all good. Uh, yeah. So,
Right.
and then throw in there the ERTC and all those other things. You know,
That's right.
just and I'm gonna leave it at that.
No, well, and I think that particular thing is a very clear indicator and a good point related to how the need for creative accountants is increasing.
For sure.
You're going to continue to see these unusual transactions, be that digital assets, be that government funding. Like all of those things are continuing to happen, and particularly as things begin to become more automated or more outsourced, that's going to change both the way that you approach your job and what it means to be creative, because you're going to have to become more innovative in that way to be an effective advisor. And so people aren't going to be looking for people who get the blocking and tackling right. That's just going to be a given. It's the person who can do this type of thing where you're innovating or being creative. that will make you stand out more than the others. And in fact, that's likely to not just be limited to accounting. It's likely to span across a lot of different skills, because the World Economic Forum has identified that analytical and creative thinking are top skills for workers. So on a going forward basis, that's not just going to be in accounting that this is an important skill. It's going to be across the board. Um, Jay, are there other examples that you can think of where where the need for being creative is continuing to increase?
Well, I think in the e-commerce world that we're working in, you know,
Yeah.
you have all these different things being tracked now by your shopping carts or your shopping platforms, and then you throw in the Google Analytics, and so we're making up KPIs as we're going because we're trying to find different ways of measuring things and evaluating, and so we're taking uh, number of shop visits over 5 minutes on Tuesdays during rainstorms, and
Right.
getting sales for that, and trying to figure out, okay, do we need it to rain more, or do, what's the average length of time that we have the optimal average order value on our shop, so things like
Right.
that. So having all those different metrics that we're tracking helps us be creative. So
Right.
they say if you want to track it, you have to measure it. So
Yeah.
at this point, measure everything if you can, and
Yeah.
be as creative as you can, because our clients need to know specific information. Well, we don't know what that information is until we come up with it. There are great KPIs right off the top, but
Right.
if you're looking deeper, and I think the metrics, the I mean, let's face it, the higher profit is the intersection of marketing and finance today. So
Yeah.
we could find that perfect intersection and get the best information from both worlds, we can actually provide our clients with more data and help them achieve more. And we're not going to know it until we create it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Which leads to this idea again of being creative or creative accounting. Now, Jay, it wasn't that long ago that creative accounting was like, and probably still does to this day, like give people some heebie-jeebies, because the Enron scandal that happened. When was that? Was that 2000, 2002? I don't even remember
I don't
now.
remember the year. I know it played havoc on some financial accounts, but
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
that, WorldCom, a bunch of other
Oh.
things. But uh,
Yeah.
think of it as strategic thinking versus creative accounting.
Yeah, that's probably
Yeah.
a more politically correct way to describe this is strategic thinking versus creative accounting, because that idea of creativity in accounting got this negative connotation from those bad events, right? That also contributed to the stereotype of accountants as boring or like lacking social skills, because you end up with this like pigeonholing of like not creative, not interesting, right? Which may also be like a factor, or not. It's not a factor in the accounting shortage issues that we have today, right? And so reclaiming the creative spirit is going to be very important going forward, because we do want to show new accounting related recruits, that isn't the way that an accountant really is. That there's more to the job than just bookkeeping and day-to-day transactional activity. There are areas where you can challenge yourself, where you can do things that are interesting, and where you have the ability to be able to express your creativity. um, Jay, when you think about Enron and the negative connotation that goes around creative accounting, like, are there other factors or other things that you think about when you go back those many years and you're like, God, if only, how different would accounting be if?
Yeah, I mean, having some flashbacks of Sarbanes-Oxley and all those other things that we
Uh-huh.
had to do subsequent to it. But you know, I think maybe it takes us back to the PCAOB, but
I was about to say the same thing. That's too
yeah,
funny.
and better. I mean, basically, it forced better audits to happen, and you know that takes away. See, I don't see auditing as creative, but
Mm-mm.
finding ways through it, that's another story. But I've never delved into that. But I mean, heavily now into tax season, you think of creative accounting, and I could tell you, I had a client send me a list of expenses for a business that hadn't even started yet, had turned a single dollar of revenue, and it had $18,000 in other operating expenses, 11,000 of which was car repairs. I'm like,
That's,
I understand the
that's maybe not.
350 miles, but I mean, tell me what the car repair has to do with, you know, selling real estate. It made no sense whatsoever. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like it's being able to determine that, and that was very creative. But when push came to shove, that list was cut down, to $2,000. So
Yeah. Yeah. Whoops.
there's a
So you
place
can
for
only be so creative.
creativity.
There.
That's not it.
Yeah. That is not the right place,
No,
right? And it's just like with Enron, right? Like that was not the right place for creativity.
for
Like
sure.
that by creating shell companies that were hiding all of this stuff, like that's the wrong kind of
Right.
creativity. That's not the kind of creativity we're talking about now. What we're talking about is the need to embrace and celebrate those creative thinkers that can allow us to attract new talent and to meet the evolving business needs of accountants and our clients. Um, Things like that help to encourage that innovation that we've talked about already, right? And challenging the status quo, I think, can be really important, especially as we adopt new technology. And so we've talked about that a little bit here before. In the future, like if all transaction activity lives on like I don't know, a U.S. blockchain or something, like that you need to be able to adopt that. And to adopt something like that, you need to be able to challenge the status quo because it's just not the way it's done right now. And when it's not, that means that you need to be creative in the way that the solutions can happen. And because when technology like that can be fully embraced and fully utilized, the as we talk about on this show every single week, the impacts are innumerable. Like there are just so many different things that you can do by automating and using AI technology that if you're not willing to be able to think about it or to get out and innovate in that way or challenge the status quo, you're just going to be left behind. Um, and so it's funny. I think I personally, Jay, I think it's funny that you don't think that audit is creative, um,
I've
because
never been an auditor, so
right. Well,
I don't know what I don't know.
right, and so I think that also is part of the issue here, right?
Hmm.
And it is funny that it is funny that it always comes back to the PCAOB. We do talk about them. It seems like every single week. So when I think about Sarbanes-Oxley and the impacts of that to the audit profession, what that required is yes, it was intended to make audits better or higher quality, but what it ultimately ended up doing was enforcing additional checklists. Because to be able to be compliant with Sarbanes-Oxley, there were this rule and that rule and that rule that you needed to take care of, and that introduction of extra checklists or things that you just like are effectively paperwork, but very very important and critical paperwork. So I'm not trying to dismiss the quality of it. It's important stuff, but it's just like did you do this? Did you do this? Did you have this conversation? Did you talk to this person? What did they say? Did you inquire with people about fraud? Did you ask about people skipping internal controls? Did you ask about the new Ferrari? Like all of those for like so in the fraud triangle, Jay, one of one of the parts of the fraud triangle is the like lifestyle change where you can identify that somebody has somebody has taken advantage of this opportunity, and so Lamborghini is often used. I just
Okay.
used Ferrari today as
Okay.
the AP clerks driving the Ferrari. That's a pretty good indicator that maybe you have some shenanigans happening behind the scenes.
G wagon.
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's right.
They have
Next
a
time
side.
I'll
They have
G
a
wagon
side
it.
hustle with no
Yeah,
income. Yeah.
that's
No.
right. Yeah, maybe
They get a
maybe
tax
the
deduction.
Uber driver or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a tax deduction. Too funny. But the PCAOB has because of these Sarbanes-Oxley rules around internal control reporting and evaluating all of the compliance that lives there. Um, like there those extra checklists, that extra work that you have to do does breed out the idea that this role is boring because you're just ticking these things off. Now, audit work more broadly is couldn't be less boring in my opinion, but that's because that's what I have been doing for whatever it was for 15 years or something, right? Because there, when you're auditing, you're auditing certain assumptions around balances, right? So you're evaluating um, what what are the ways that I can evaluate whether this balance is accurate or not, and some of those things are through direct like direct confirmation. So if you're looking at a bank balance, right, you can ask the bank what the balance is, and that's very good evidence of what the bank balance should be. But when you get to something like an AR allowance or a warranty reserve or a reserve for inventory obsolescence or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
right? These things are estimates, and that means that management had to use creativity to build the model, and so you as the auditor also have to use creativity to understand whether or not that thing is reasonable or not. And if you think about a really big income statement, um, the day-to-day activity, right? You're only getting so much value by evaluating whether or not transactions were recorded properly. The real value that you get is in expense evaluation is not like what's there, but what's not there.
Right. Right.
And the
So
way the
So, question for you. Going back to like
yeah
building your warranty reserve or your inventory allowance. So,
yeah
you want to use creativity when creating that, but you have to be consistent and not change that creativity year after year. Correct?
yeah that's absolutely true. And that's that's one of the questions on the checklist. is is the methodology has the methodology been consistently applied from period to period?
Right.
Because those types of things, and this is my viewpoint to the future of audit work, right? Is those types of things, those areas where management has judgment, are by far, without question, the easiest things for management to manipulate. And so, if you're ever going to commit financial statement fraud, the absolute easiest way to do it is to change your AR reserve and to change the methodology that you use to build it, right? Because if you need a little, or like some other kind of an accrual reserve, right? Like those two things kind of are the basicest of places where you can up and down you're really easily without too much feedback either. And so like that's that's where auditors need to be creative and thoughtful and innovative. Of, is management doing this with an intention? Is management making this change because it is actually fundamentally more appropriate to do it this way? Or is management making this change because it got them a fat bonus? um, and and so those are the types of things that as an auditor you have to like be thinking about. um,
So, when you're getting ready to do an audit and you're building your audit program,
sure.
do you have to maintain consistency there, or can you change things up from year over year and be creative about how you're going to go about testing things?
There's actually a sentence, and I don't know if it's one sentence or if it's one paragraph, but within the audit standards there is actually a requirement. No, this may sound crazy, but there is a requirement that to some degree you have to be unpredictable. And the reason for that, right, is if you always confirm every single AR transaction over a certain dollar threshold, and you always you always test your SERL at a certain dollar threshold, and you're so consistent in the way that you do this work, management will just exploit that consistency. Is the thought process, and so it's actually right there in the audit standards to be somewhat unpredictable and to consider changing. Now, that doesn't mean like recreate the wheel every year. Like you shouldn't do that. That's probably ridiculous from a like um, uh, realization standpoint. Like you just don't want to spend a whole bunch of time building a whole new idea of how you test this inventory reserve. Um, but but you do want to change some of the way you're testing, or change the evaluation of some of the tests you're doing, or maybe even change an account or two that you test, because not all of them, you might not test all accounts because of their size. um, and so yeah, there's you don't have to be creative every year, right? You can do the same procedure for testing a certain balance over and over and over. You don't have to do the same thing every year either, though, because you do want you I mean there's incentive to do it, to do it faster. There's incentive to do it better, easier, all of that kind of stuff, right? Because there's always financial incentive related to that. um, and then of course, like there is literally a standard to have some layer of unpredictability, so that management just can't take advantage of you doing the same test every year. so
That makes sense.
so right. um, And so what that does is, for auditors, it helps you to develop those creative or critical thinking skills related to this, where you do need to think about, like, how does this environment, how does the changing environment impact my client? And also, like, how can it help me to stimulate new ideas? It also encourages, like, idea generation without judgment, right? Because that was one of my favorite things. Like, hey, if this work paper is a failure, right? If it's just not the best way to do this, then let's do something different, because there isn't some requirement to do it the same way, right? You should be afforded the ability to do something new, and to have a new idea, and to generate this new idea without feeling as though you're going to get some kind of pushback in a negative way. I think that's an important thing for the profession broadly going forward as well. Um, I opened the can and it's spilled everywhere. So, womp womp. Um, and then on top of that, like, I do think one of the things that's also going to happen in the near future is that, um, like, the way that we're thinking about these types of things are going to change as well, and that's going to mean that we're going to utilize visual thinking. So maybe dashboarding, or even in some cases potentially like AR, that kind of stuff, like augmented reality or virtual reality. Like, we're going to start to see that have an impact on the way that we're perceived. So you're going to have some perception shifting, and I think it's going to be really important to do that, because um, it is true that to be a really effective advisor, you do need to be able to. You're not going to do the same thing every time, right? I and that's true of anybody, right? Every single e-commerce business is going to have some kind of difference about them that makes them unique and special, which means that you're not always going to be able to do and execute exactly the same thing over and over and over again, or you're going to give bad advice. And so you do need this ability to be able to think differently, and to shift the way that you're thinking based on the situation that you're in. Um, what do you think about creative thinking skills and trying to develop them? Are there good ways to do that in the accounting profession right now, Jay?
Oh, that's a great question.
Sorry, you're welcome.
I think brainstorming amongst groups of professionals like that would
Yeah,
be really
love
good
that.
at coming up with ideas.
Yep.
And it's like, just throw words out, and throw ideas out, and don't
Yeah.
just say, just don't rule it out, because you know what you perceive as a bad idea, somebody else is going to make it work really well. So You know,
Right.
figure out what works for somebody else and see if you can adapt it. And you know, in networking with your peers and talking about methods of being creative, and you know, talk to your clients because they're going through it a bit differently internally themselves, and they might have other ways of being creative that you can learn from your clients as well. So always know
Yeah.
that it's bi-directional and comes from all directions. It's not
Right.
bi-directional. It's 360.
Multi
Yeah, it's
omnidirectional.
omnidirectional. I was exactly thinking the same thing. So I think that's probably the best way to do it. And use your technology to figure it out as well. You know,
Yeah.
if you have access to Chat GBT, and you can go into that chat mode, have a conversation with it, and find out what are other ways of doing it. And the conversational AI in ChatGPT is I did it a couple of times while I was driving, and it was amazing with the responses I got. Now I will say, one time it was completely hallucinating and it was horrible, but the other time it was dead on, and
Yeah.
it was great. And actually, I realized shortly thereafter that I wasn't using the pro version. I was using just the standard
Oh,
version, and the pro version was dead on. I mean, I actually told,
well,
and it's not accounting related. I was having a NASCAR conversation. I told you this. I had a NASCAR
yeah.
conversation with it, and I actually was able to pull that conversation and put it into a YouTube video because it was so good.
Right.
So,
Oh, I love
there
that.
are very many different ways of going about it.
Absolutely, and I think that that's a thing that we want to continue to build as a culture of the industry. And I think this is one of the points that Mike makes, right? Is that we have to build a culture of innovation and embracing that the creative thinker. Right? That is just that's the future of the profession. Um, because otherwise you're going to become like we're just going to become the stereotype. Obviously, Jay, we know that stereotype is absurd. Um, but I think when people watch The Accountant 2 in another couple weeks, or did it already come out? I don't know. But like, if when people watch The Accountant 2, like they're gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe an accountant would ever do this," because it's because of the stereotype that exists there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the only way to build that pipeline for our profession going forward is to make the profession something that people want to embrace, which means that you need to be able to embrace the creative thinkers of the future. Um, and that would have been a perfect spot to end. But there are definitely some like examples of like creative accounting challenges, and as well as the impacts that technology can have. So. Like anytime you get into a situation, we've talked about them already, really, like the creative accounting challenges, right? If you have an ambiguous business transaction, like there can be, creativity involved in how that needs to be handled. Um, there can be creativity actually too, Jay, and this is in the tax land, but like there's some creativity involved in how you should structure your business, especially. And so if you think about that
Yeah.
opening business transaction, like there's creativity involved in like what kind of business should I be? What kind of where should I invest my money related to this?
Yeah.
Like how should this structure happen? Right? That's a really important business decision that accountants are always involved in the advisory portion of, which means that you always have to be creative in that way. Uh, of course, creative accounting challenges also are focused on navigating unprecedented situations, right? And so we've talked about cryptocurrency in this, we've talked about PPP and EIDL and ERTC and all of that kind of stuff, right? Those types of things are going to continue to happen, and in those situations, like you need to be able to be creative in order to address them. Um, and then we opened this whole conversation by talking about how developing efficient operational workflows, like understanding how technology works best, understanding how technology can supplement the work that you're doing already, and improve it for both you, your team, and your clients' teams. That 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 the creativity that goes along with that is truly where we as a profession are going to be able to make the most hay, take the advantage of this ability to be creative, because that area is an area where we have expertise, and it's an area that we'll be able to influence because ultimately, when you're developing things that are efficient, you're increasing profitability. And when you're increasing profitability, that the way you do that is through accounting, right? Like you were talking about, Jay, the intersection of marketing and finance is in accounting. That's where profit ends up, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yep. And of course, technology is going to help to do this. It also means that we need to make sure we have a sufficient emphasis on recruiting creative thinkers, the people that have these things, because I think we haven't done that in the past because of that like relatively negative stereotype around creative accounting, and that's maybe led to a skills gap for people who have tried to transition on into advisory style roles. They've missed this opportunity because they just don't they those people are all engineers now or something, or
Well,
data scientists or whatnot.
the perception is, oh, you're an accountant, you do taxes, and it's not the truth. I mean,
Yeah, it is,
it's the farthest from it. And yeah, some of
particularly for
us,
me.
right, some of us do taxes, some of us don't want to do taxes, and people just think that's the reality, and it's truly not. And you
I
know,
don't even like doing my own taxes. Ugh.
I gotta say, the best part of my day is talking to clients and finding out
Right.
what's going on in their lives and what we can do to help them. And
Yep.
that's the creative part of it.
That's right. The what you can do to help somebody, that's where you will always be able to be creative. There will never be one answer to that question for every single person because everybody has different needs. And so because of that, like the practical output, right? So if you're thinking about how to effectively implement creativity in your daily routine, do a couple things. Um, Walk around, right? Walk around, change your environment to stimulate new ideas, right? Brainstorm without judgment. We talked about that. My a favorite line that I have right now is there's no bad idea in a brainstorm, because it is just that, right? Like it's the ability to throw out some new idea, new strategy, um, and then it work together with your team to use metaphors or visual representations in order to understand complex problems. That type of creativity, that's truly artistic stuff when you're using visual representation. And so everyone that is in the profession, right, has this ability to be creative on a daily basis of thinking about how you can positively impact those around you, and that doing that and owning that is what's going to ultimately shift the perspective around the accounting profession. So um, that's what I'd ask you to do today. Think about the ways you were creative already and lean into them, because those types of things are what's going to make you unique on a going forward basis, and they're also going to help the profession overall.
Yeah, I would say like what you're saying, but go into the discomfort and find out what makes you
Mm.
uncomfortable and go deeper. And by doing so, it will make you so much more creative and so much more comfortable doing it. So
Right.
that's yeah, that's about it from
Yeah. Well, and that's really about it for what we had to talk about today, Jay. Do
there.
you
There you
have any final thoughts related to creativity?
go. No, not right there. No, we're good.
Right. Fantastic.
I can tell you though, this last weekend, not this weekend, the weekend before, with NASCAR and
Yeah.
some creativity, there
Oh
was
yeah.
somebody they needed to put a little bit of weight in the car, so they put it in the
Mm.
water bottle. They took the water bottle and put lead in it to put more weight on that side of the car. That's creative.
Wow.
It cost them
Is that
twenty five
illegal though?
thousand dollars.
Yeah. It's the wrong kind of creativity, Jay.
Well, no, I mean that's competitive creativity. It's a great gray area, and it bit them. But if they weren't caught, it was perfect. It's great.
Too funny. Too funny. What
I'm
what
so
It
conversation.
does.
That's a
That is a creative solution to a
yep.
problem that they had, right? And so again, what my final note is exactly the one that I just said, right? Accountants are creative significantly more frequently than you realize. And so if you take the time to think back on where you've been creative for your clients in an advisory capacity, I think that you'll find that you've done it today, you've done it yesterday, and you've done it several times in the prior weeks, in years and months, and whatever else. Creativity is a core component of our profession. And because of that, it's something that we should embrace and it's something that we should highlight going forward. And in doing so is going to make us better and it's going to make the future of the profession better as well. Boom, period. Lock it up. Lock it up. Jay, did we talked about it. Do we have an automation of the week? No, that's not true. I know it's not quite live, Jay, but you've built an automation that
Well, that's not an automation. I mean, I built a web app to put on our High Rock web page. Uh,
oh my gosh.
about
So this is a
four. What? What?
what is it?
What?
It's so instead of being an automation, what it's like a adaption of technology. Like what are we talking? What
Yeah,
are we calling this
pretty
here?
much. Yeah. I mean, an
Okay, all
automation
right.
would have been, having it do it on its own without even thinking, just put numbers in there. But yeah,
Mm,
4 weeks ago when we had the initial tariff talk, I put
yep.
together an Excel file that would calculate landed cost and actually help you set your pricing based on your expected, or not your expected, but your profit margin percentage that you wanted to achieve. So,
Right.
as we're looking at it and sending it out, it's like, yeah, it's great and all, but it'd be better if it was on our website and it look a whole lot prettier. And it really does. It
Right.
looks great. And
Yeah.
I got the front end completely done. Calculations are great. Just working on the deliverable right now, and
Yeah.
got about an hour of formatting left on it, and it'll be done.
Yeah.
But like I said, when you need help with creativity, use ChatGPT or AI, and it helped me. It helped me build out the site very well. And
Oh, I love
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Right, and so Jay, you are a living example of embracing creativity,
of
because
course.
you have branched out from the standard Excel file that uses built-in Excel calculations in order to present an entire different deliverable here. And so I'm really excited to share that with everyone when you're done because it is a real it's number one, it's useful, right? Like
Yeah, for sure.
it can be really powerful, especially right now because it is really relevant, because the tariffs are real again today. They're back
Yeah,
on again. Um,
and yet
uh,
the tariff for China had doubled now. So
right,
now instead of 10%, it's 20%. So
right,
in my little example, it drove the product up over $2 just for the tariff alone. So
yeah,
if you were pricing your product, in this case, it was I had
with
it
the
priced
European tariff.
at 15.95, and it was like it had a 4% profit margin. I mean, you can't live on that because that's the cost of buying it right there, the cost of cash
Yeah,
to buy it. So
yeah,
you're going to have to price that well into the mid 20s now in order to
yeah.
keep your margin on it. So yeah, you got to
It's
protect
a really
yourselves.
important thing. Like I
Yeah,
said, it's really useful. It's a value add to people that will see it and that will use it. And so because of that, like that's exactly the execution of stuff that we're talking about today.
right.
Being creative in how you serve your clients and the types of things that are important to them on a daily basis. So be on the lookout for that. If there are creative things that you that we didn't talk about today that you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. You're a ghost right now, and you're like, I'm screaming at us. I can't believe you didn't talk about X, Y, or Z. Like, put that in the comments. Let us know. We'd love to
Yeah, for
hear
sure.
people's positive creative accounting stories. And the more of them that we hear, the more of them we'll shout out here. Um, of course, next week we'll be back once again. Um, I know there was progress maybe in the last 2 weeks now on a tax bill, Jay? Question mark.
I don't know.
Um, yeah,
Maybe we'll
so maybe
find out something tonight.
maybe we'll find out something tonight. Maybe it'll be the Friday news drop or the Sunday news drop, like the Department of Treasury did,
Yeah.
um, with the BOI reporting. Who knows? But whatever it is, whenever it happens, we'll be here to talk about it on Tuesday afternoon. So come see us on the practice playbook. I'm Chris. He's Jay. We'll see you in the next one. Have a good
See you,
afternoon,
everybody.
everyone. Bye.
Have a great week.